Hello, friends. Today is the 14th of June, 2018. I guess I've been doing these programs one way or another for about 8 years, since 2010. And I'd like to begin again. I've done some work. Um, I've done some work that relates to the third initiation. And now I'm going to move backwards just a little bit and look at some excerpts which relate to the second initiation. And then we'll go back and hopefully we'll take in initiation 1. I'll have the references below. Some of these were gathered a long time ago, and not all by myself either. But it looks like they are ripe for a little bit of discussion. And although we're taking them out of context as references, perhaps something of value will come across. And we will be able to understand more deeply this kind of progression that leads to ever deeper understanding of the kind of world we have and what our place within it may be. So actually, it's quite a while since I've been able to do this, so please bear with me as I try to make sure that things are properly plugged in, like I'm trying right this very minute. All right, so this is a compilation on the second initiation, and this is program number 1 in that compilation. All right, so as I say, these are not in order, so you'll have to sort of piece them together. They are somewhat in order with respect to the books in which they appear. The first is from The Destiny of the Nations. This is called The Reorientation of the Soul Towards the Monad After the Second Initiation. What an interesting idea. And if I can look at this a little bit in terms of diagrams, we may be able to see why this is the case. So these are the AAB diagrams, and if I go here to the diagram number 8, the egoic lotus and the centers, we will see that the second initiation largely focuses upon the second plane or sixth plane, depending on how we're counting, and it has the same numbers, 6 and 2, 2 and 6, as does the monadic plane, where the monad, as we usually consider it, is found. It's the second and sixth plane, and here on the emotional plane is, let's count from the top, sixth plane first and second plane second, counting from below. So there's definitely a relation here when we talk about the orientation to the monad on the monadic plane. So let's make this, let's see. Stand by me here, I'm just getting started again and may take just a little while before I can do that. Okay, so here, and we'll copy this. Okay, so we can look therefore, says the Tibetan, for a steady appearance gradually and cautiously applied, because if it's not cautiously applied, it will destroy the vehicle, so strong it is, of the will energy of the highest center, Shambhala, which is to be found upon our planet. Now, Shambhala is a globe center. It's also, in a way, from a higher point of view, a chain center, and from the highest point of view, it is a scheme center. So there are many representations of the scheme Shambhala within the chains and within the various globes. This center corresponds to the monadic center, which makes its power felt in the consciousness of the disciple who is ready for the third initiation. I would say that, let's just say, interest in the monad. This is English, United States. There's so many little things to handle here. Set as default, yes, yes. So this is the word monad. Interest in the monad becomes more acute as the third initiation is approached. And allow me to bring this down into a non-bolded situation. I'll be with you almost in my consciousness at any time. So the power of Shambhala is cautiously applied, so cautiously that even the entire hierarchy must meet as a whole in order to receive and process the Shambhala energy. So strong it is, and we're told that it is, in a way, the power which touches and then withdraws. It's associated with the first ray energy, and that touch is exquisitely calibrated to the form which it is touching, lest there be devastation, devastation. Once the second initiation has been taken, and this is the initiation of entering the stream, the watching hierarchy, and notice that they are interested in the affairs of every becoming initiate. Once this initiation has been taken, the watching hierarchy can begin to note the constant reorientation of the soul towards the monad. And so during this period between the second and third initiation, the Sanat Kumara as a subject becomes more meaningful. So does Shambhala, so does the entire factor of identification. So those are the hints that, in fact, the monadic studies, the monadic energy is coming more to the fore. And of course, the study of the will naturally increase between the second and third initiation, because Vulcan is beginning to overcome the power of Mars. Will is beginning to overcome the power of desire. And by the time we reach the third degree, we have a relationship between Vulcan and Mars, where Vulcan is veiled by the moon and stands for, and the moon stands for a hidden planet. That hidden planet is the planet of the will. The monad is the repository of what we call the will, and therefore it's kind of a warm-up as we move from desire into will between the second and third initiation. Okay. So once the second initiation has been taken, the entering of the stream, as it's called, progress is very rapid, of course, at that point, the watching hierarchy can begin to note the constant reorientation of the soul towards the monad. The being on the higher mental plane is looking in two directions, and the soul, let's just call it from a certain perspective, the angel of the presence, is beginning to look towards the monad And so is that part of consciousness which is ours, and upon the higher mental plane, it begins to look towards the monad. And the soul in incarnation, which in a way is what we are here in these lower 18 subplanes, these lower worlds, begins to think about the monad and the attractive power uh, of that highest aspect over the initiate. And so we have the initiate of basically of the second degree becoming the initiate of the third degree, and the attractive magnetic power of the monad is being asserted. Remember that the magnetism has very much of the first ray in it. DK has told us that it is a combination of the two rays in action, the first and the second. Today, so many members of the human family in incarnation or out of incarnation have taken the first two initiations. And that's very encouraging, isn't it? That the attention of Shambhala is being increasingly turned towards humanity and humanity's attention toward Shambhala to a degree via the hierarchy and also somewhat directly through the Shambhala impacts, whilst simultaneously the thoughts of men are being turned to the plan found on the atmic plane and reflecting what the monad knows of the divine plan, since the monad is an aspect of the centers of the planetary logos. There are 7 great circles or centers upon the monadic plane, and within these ray centers, filled with monads that are human and Devic, the plan is known in a much higher degree than even the soul or that part of the human being which is on the uh, higher mental plane than even the soul knows it. So the thoughts of men are being turned towards the plan to use to the use of the will in direction. Now that's a important idea because the will is a directing factor and make sure we do not go astray into all kinds of errant paths and guidance, and to the nature of dynamic force, force which is powerful, can overcome, can impel, can compel, and which moves things along. The quality, for instance, of the explosive and dynamic nature of war in this century is indicative of this attention of Shambhala towards humanity, where the will energy is one of its aspects is an expression of death and destruction. I think sometimes in its third aspect, it is an expression of death and destruction. Maybe the will to good more in relation to the second aspect, and the will to be more in relation to the first aspect. The first aspect is the ray of the destroyer, and in Pluto and in Vulcan, 2 planets, the power of which will be demonstrated as the reappearance of the Christ approaches. You're finding this ray of the destroyer, and especially in relation to Pluto. Now, now right here we see some interactions between the 3 major planetary centers, and we see at present that Shambhala is reaching humanity. Humanity was upward reaching towards Shambhala in the past, and this was one of the causes of individualization before the solar angels became involved. And we see in the future it's going to be a 2-way street between each of the centers, humanity and hierarchy, hierarchy and Shambhala, Shambhala and humanity. The arrow is going in both directions, but at the present time, Shambhala is stimulating humanity. Hierarchy is reaching towards Shambhala, and probably there are those within the human family, maybe not so many, who are also reaching towards the divine will and that arrow is not so much here demonstrated. It could be, you see. But this gives us the general idea. So, okay, that's that first paragraph. There's so much in these paragraphs, of course, and I always feel like I'm leaving something behind, but this is from The Destiny of the Nations, page 120. The next one, it comes from Destiny of the Nations 138, 139. Obviously, some of the references will not be present, but enough will be present to give us an idea of how the second initiation functions in the life of the, let's call it probationary initiate. The second initiation is closely related to the hierarchy and brotherhood, okay, closely related to the hierarchy as a planetary center and to the activity of the second ray. Well, hierarchy is the second major center, and although the sixth ray is the ray that is particularly active for human beings at the second initiation, it is, after all, the second initiation, and all of the planets involved in that initiation, particularly Venus, Jupiter, and Neptune, they all have a strong second ray component, either on the monadic level or the soul level. So we have to look for numerical affinity in all of these, and there the relationships will appear when we use this factor of numerical affinity. This initiation will produce in the initiate a growing sense of relationships, of a basic unity with all that breathes, and a recognition of the one life, which will lead eventually to that stage of expressed brotherhood, which it is the goal of the Aquarian age to bring into being, and especially toward the end of the Aquarian age, the last decanate of Aquarius, the last 720 years or so out of the 2,160, which is the usual span of an equinoctial age, and that is ruled by Venus, which probably has a pretty strong second ray personality and a sixth ray second ray monad. So obviously at this initiation it would be very important in helping the mind, the higher mind, especially the soul mind, to bring calmness and the Christ life into the astral body. Quite interesting that relationship, of course, is governed by the second ray, and unity is governed by the second ray. Not synthesis so much, but unity, okay? And a recognition of the one life. You know, usually you would think of that as related to the third degree and to the factor of oneness, but of course it simply intensifies by that point. And basically DK is telling us that when we do recognize the one life, it's much easier for us to recognize the brotherhood of all monads, the oneness of all monads. So think of what is offered here during the Aquarian age, the lesser Aquarian age of 2,160, and the greater Aquarian age, which, well, it's rounded off to 25,000 years, which is a huge span of time. Try to think back 25,000 years, and we're going to run into trouble making any kind of clear conception. And it's probably not the exact number of years in the Aquarian, a larger Aquarian age. Probably it's somewhat more, maybe closer to 26,000, but we don't have the exact numbers at our disposal. We have what they've offered us in terms of approximations, we might say. Okay. Now, I'm just trying to make sure that you hear me adequately. Um, Sometimes there's a little fluctuation in how successfully the voice is recorded. And right now it seems to be recording a little bit low, but let's hope that there is adequate hearing. So all of these factors are operating after the second degree, that we are not in isolation, but we are in fact related to many, many things in various ways, and that these many, many things are basically unified. The various forms of life, all that breathes, maybe even the minerals breathe in their own way, they are all unified somehow, and a recognition of the one life. Now, I guess we have to ask this thing here, like this. Is this the same as an identification with and as the one life? And maybe not. Maybe the recognition comes first and the identification as the one life comes afterwards, which will eventually lead eventually to that state of not just recognized brotherhood, but expressed brotherhood. And that's so important because we can have the theory and we can understand that it's true that monadically at least all human beings are brothers, the sons and daughters, but let's just say the emanations of the one Father. But we don't necessarily express it, and we have to learn how to express it. And I would say that increasingly after the third degree, that ability to express is found. In Masonry, the FC degree, DK talks about it, it is in a way the brotherhood degree. It's the second degree in Blue Lodge Masonry. And the factor of brotherhood is certainly coming into focus. All right, express brotherhood. So this major center of the hierarchy brings to bear upon humanity the focused life of love. And that is the way the astral body should be expressing as we are taking the second degree. And it is this basic love which the second decade of Aquarius, governed as it is by Mercury, will bring into manifestation, as well as a tremendous mind. Now remember, Mercury has much of the fourth ray, which is akin to the second ray of love. These rays are very much interrelated. Rays 1 and 2 are related, 2 and 4 and 3 and 6. DK tells us all in a special way. So this is something really to think about. And of course, that love is going to be enhanced into a purer form of expressed brotherhood by the time we reach the third decanate of Aquarius, governed by Venus, which is very much a planet of love. It's connected with the solar plexus of the solar logos, and also by some statements from DK with the heart center of the solar logos. It's very much in analogy to the other planets, as Christ is in analogy to other initiates. He traveled farther, faster, was younger, but achieved tremendous abilities more rapidly than did his brothers. So the second decade will bring this focused life of love, which makes sense because it is the second decade. I had usually thought of this very much in terms of mind and magic and the highest development of manas possible in the Aquarian age, but there's more to it, apparently. It's always good to read these references topically and see these things side by side. Mercury, the messenger of the gods, that is, of the hierarchy of souls. See, who are the gods after all? And they are members of the spiritual hierarchy from one way of thinking, not just the great planetary gods, carries always the message of love and sets up an unbreakable interrelation between the two great planetary centers, that of the hierarchy and that of humanity. This is really, I'm learning so much as I go, learning as I go. Hopefully, you too. So, Mercury is probably a fifth ray monad, ultimately a third ray monad, but it has that strong second ray of intermediary ship, of connection, of linking, So that's pretty much on the 2 and the 4 line. I just sort of want to ponder on this as I look at it. Mercury, the messenger of the gods, that is of the hierarchy of souls, carries always the message of love and sets up an unbreakable interrelation between the two great planetary centers, that of hierarchy and that of humanity. So you can kind of see when you look at the constellations Gemini, a constellation which carries the second ray, the constellation Virgo, which carries more of the second ray at this time than any other constellation. You notice they're both ruled by Mercury. So there are constellations carrying the second ray preeminently. The only ray we're given for Gemini is the second ray. There are probably others, probably the third ray is involved somehow. And we're given the sixth ray for Virgo, but the second ray is preeminent, and so the ruling planet is going to carry that second ray energy. So let's put that down. Ruling planet of Gemini and Virgo is Mercury and carries the second ray energy into expression. There's so much to learn by interrelating the different nuggets of knowledge which Master DK presents to us. And then, when we get these different presentations into the proper cognitive relationship, the light flashes forth and we understand something that we did not understand before. Yes, I am here in our Temple of Silence, and the sword is on the wall. We have a number of swords here. My wife is very much on the first ray. She loves swords, and I'm surrounded by them, so I better do my job, okay? All right, so this is from the Destiny of the Nations 138 and 139. I learned something here about love and the second decanate and Mercury, which expands my understanding from a more monastic interpretation to one that involves unity and love, wisdom. So the second decanate of Aquarius, which of course resonates to the number 2 and is ruled by Mercury. And let's see, it's also, there's kind of Pegasus, I think, is involved there, will definitely be useful in preparing humanity for brotherhood. I still hold to the idea, though, that the true era of achieved and expressed brotherhood occurs under Venus in the third decanate. And maybe Venus having so much to do with the solar angels, perhaps the recognition and understanding of the solar angels will be a special type of recognition and realization at that time. Okay, now here's something about the stage between the first and second initiation. And we do know that Pisces and Aquarius as constellations do kind of overlap, and there's a fish there drinking from the stream of water pouring forth from the water bearer in Aquarius, and it says waters of Pisces are being absorbed into the water pot of Aquarius. Of course, Pisces rules the great ocean in a way, and these two signs together are signs of finality and saviorship. We know that so many initiates end their career on Earth as world servers in Aquarius, but a few go on to Shambhala or are strongly affected by the first ray in Shambhala energy and end their career in Pisces. I think it's possible to take the third, fourth, and even fifth initiation in Aquarius, maybe the second too. Okay, and in Pisces, you can take certainly through the death process in Pluto, the fourth initiation, and certainly the fifth for some who are especially sacrificial and work along or will work along the line of world saviors. Now, this is the next reference from The Destiny of the Nations, page 150. Okay, so we just have to kind of take it up from what it says. Tuya and I will be reading these various books as we present different broadcasts, and already she's reading The Reappearance of the Christ when we are presenting the meditation on the reappearance of the Christ, and I hope that when we do the Soul of Nations, that we will be reading the Destiny of the Nations straight through, and in our Glamour webinars, not broadcasts, but webinars, we are reading Glamour, A World Problem straight through. We have, as of now, only 7 years to absorb as much as may be possible what the Tibetan has already given us, which is a tremendous gift. And the question is, can we do it in such a way that he feels that we have earned the right for as full a possible revelation in the third installment as may be offered? Much will depend on us. Okay, then followed, as we are told in the New Testament, a cycle of 30 years. This is after the birth, I assume, wherein all we know is that the infant Jesus, Jeshua, grew to manhood. And if we believe the Agni Yoga story, at a certain point, I guess his name was Issa, is another way of looking at it, he went to India and learned a lot and maybe met those with whom he would be working in the future in deep subjectivity. So the infant Jesus grew to manhood and could then take the second initiation, the baptism in the River Jordan, as we call it, a great purification, especially of the astral nature, but leading also, I would say, because the desire nature is purified, to the purification of the physical nature, the final stages of that. So the second initiation, the baptism in Jordan, and began his public service. Now there's a hint. Here's a hint. This is a hint about the public service of those disciples today who are taking the second initiation. And so, you see people emerging as maybe teachers or servers on the political line or in the financial field or whatever. It could be an indication that their relatively selfless presentation and service indicates that they have taken the second degree. Today, the many who in this life have taken the first initiation are entering the long silence of that symbolic 30 years wherein they too will grow to manhood and take the second initiation. So they are taught, how about that, AU, and when they begin to emerge in effectiveness, the indication is that they have taken the second initiation. It's sometimes hard when you look around to assess, what initiation an individual has taken, but there is the old statement that by their fruits ye shall know them, and there are other indications which will tell us, really where people stand, at least more or less. We don't have to know exactly where they stand. I mean, if you're an esoteric astrologer, you have to have some kind of idea, or an esoteric psychologist. Otherwise, you cannot really be helpful. And you may propose for the help of an individual something which is unsuitable to their present stage of development. So at least we need a reasonable approximation. Right. Okay. This initiation demonstrates the complete control of the emotional nature and of all Piscean characteristics. You sometimes think about America at the present time as the heir to the sixth-ray Piscean civilization, and its rays being 2 and 6, which are rays closely associated with the second initiation. And you can see that so many have not taken this degree, but that opportunity may be offered through the reorientation of desire to take this degree. The 30 years can be looked upon as a period of spiritual unfoldment during the 3 divisions into which Aquarius, and consequently the new age now upon us, will be divided. I suppose 0 to 10, 10 to 20, 20 to 30. And there are secret aspects to the life of Jesus Issa, if Agni Yoga is correct about his travels. Somehow he had to establish a relationship with the Christ who was overshadowing him and was even then the head of the hierarchy as a 5th degree initiate. Could this be done subjectively? I think, of course, but it would be interesting to think that he journeyed to India and met his brothers, so to speak, as they would be in the hierarchy. Okay. So, divisions of 30 years. I refer to what is technically known as the 3 decans of each sign, decanates. Okay, we've been discussing that a little bit. In this sign, the waters of the Piscean age will, symbolically speaking, and that means all the values and learnings of obedience and kind of a resignation, proper Piscean attitudes, the relinquishing of the will and so forth to a higher type of will, and the kind of love energy, or sometimes, as DK calls it, the pervasive wisdom of Pisces when he talks about Jupiter in relation to it. In this sign, the waters of the Piscean age will, symbolically speaking, be absorbed into the water pot carried on the shoulder of Aquarius in the symbol, which is distinctive of this sign, a great labor to carry it on your shoulders, we're told. For Aquarius is the water carrier, bringing the water of life, dynamic, subjective energy which animates the etheric bodies and general personality of all aspiring souls, bringing the water of life to the people, life more abundantly. And so we certainly expect that life more abundantly, which is the giving of which is one of the reasons that Christ said he had come, that they may have life more abundant or more abundantly, that this will characterize the Aquarian age. So basically we're moving, there's that overlap between Pisces and Aquarius as constellations, and we move apparently backwards or clockwise, and all that has been attained in Pisces is put into the water pot and offered in service along with the Aquarian energy. So we're not done with the improved and more refined, sensitive Piscean energies. There's still training of psychics going on, scientific psychics under Master Hilarion. And there's still the relinquishing of the will to a higher will. So many of the Piscean virtues have still to be carried on in Aquarius, and this is symbolized in a way by the idea that the Christ is the Bodhisattva for both the passing Piscean age and the incoming Aquarian age. We're talking about the lesser ages now. The Christ obviously was not the Bodhisattva for the 25,000 year, approximately, greater Piscean age. And probably from what is being discussed, I don't know what kind of Bodhisattva there would be for that great duration, probably not the kind of planetary Bodhisattva we talk about generally, with a span of service lasting 2,500 years usually, but the Christ's span of service is lasting 5,000 years, and it's kind of symbolic of the, or correlatable with the overlap of the constellation Pisces and Aquarius. You know, the gift the Tibetan has given is quite astonishing, and I don't know, as I go along, I appreciate it more and more. I guess I've been reading the Bailey books now for almost 50 years, and theosophical books longer than that. And then you arrive at the end of the trail for an incarnation, you realize you don't know anything. But okay, we can be as the Tibetan is, and he studied a long time, over centuries and even millennia, and he became what he is through due diligence of study, meditation, and application in service. Okay, so it's such wonderful things that are found here, and you begin to realize it when you begin to study topically, as the Tibetan suggested. You can lose something studying topically because you lose the horizontal cohesion of how he develops his thought, but at the same time you can juxtapose certain ideas which are presented side by side and which you would not get in a horizontal, straight through reading of the book. So he said, do study topically, and that's what we are doing here. All right, here's the next one. It's about the keynote of the second initiation. It is Love of Humanity from Destiny of the Nations. No, it's from Dinah, 87 and 88. Have we already exhausted the Destiny of the Nations? I always have this fear of leaving things out, you know. It's a compulsion towards completeness, but then we are completeness itself in our utmost essence. So in a relative life, in a relative universe, we cannot search for anything but relative completeness. Anyway, from Dinah 1. In the New Age, as I have earlier pointed out, the keynote of the aspirant's progress would be love of humanity. Well, these are words we can use, love of humanity, but to what extent is it real, and how do we make it real? You know, even one's enemies, apparent enemies in the relative world, have to be seen and in a certain way in which love becomes the reality of the true interrelation. Even one's enemies, because one's enemies will all turn into the same being eventually, and it will be realized, and you know, you cannot hate the oneself. The oneself is all we are. So naturally, there has to be a transition from the state of enemy into the state of brother or sister, however we want to look at it. So, and this love of humanity will indicate the awakening of the heart center. Now, even though it's the sacral center and the sacral center and the throat center, which are active at the first degree, they are also active at the second degree. And the heart center is active at both. So maybe at all initiations. Heart center is active at both the first initiation and the second initiation. And really, we could never discount it. There always has to be, the heart is the soul, there always has to be increasing capacity and sensitization of the heart. It's especially indicated as the major target center at the fourth degree. So in the past and up until the last few years, the keynote has been service. Well, you know, we're in the 1930s here. He's writing in the 1930s, I think. Because if selflessly rendered, it embodied a technique which automatically brought the heart center into activity. Service and the heart. But how are things different now? Okay. Service and the heart were the keynotes up until recently. It is love. It is love of humanity, which is the major lack in the character of many disciples today. Well, that's so utterly true, you know. And we have only to search our own motives and, you know, wonder how it is we got into certain esoteric groups and became students of the Tibetan and find ourselves aspiring towards growth. And is it the love of humanity and the desire to serve the loved humanity which brought us there? The Tibetan seems to tell us it is not. They love those with whom they may be associated. Here's the rebuke, huh? Or they love the work connected with the group endeavor, or they love their own nation. They may also love an ideal or theoretical assumption, but they do not really love humanity as a whole. Now, one could really stop there, right there, and say, okay, what about that? What about that? Do we, you know, just pause for just a moment of reflection and ask yourself, do I love humanity as a whole? And if not, what is preventing it? How far am I from this stage of love? You know, it's to be meditated upon and fearlessly faced, whatever the conclusion may be. You know, sometimes I add the little phrase, yes, on a good day. On a good day, God's in his heaven and all's right with the world, and I love humanity on a good day. But there are all kinds of obstacles to that outflowing and inclusive love which sees beyond the personality into the soul nature. The Tibetan says here, there are limits to their capacity to love, and it is the transcending of those limits which constitutes their main problem at this time. So important, you know, when you isolate these things. You may have just sort of read over them, but there they are staring you in the face, and you have to learn to deal with them. They have to learn that it is humanity which calls for their allegiance. Certainly not any country, like, you know, let's just say America first, retrogression, which calls for their allegiance, their loyalty and service. It is humanity itself, the entirety of humanity, every single soul, whether in the body or out of the body. I would ask you all to ponder deeply on the above statements, for they embody the task ahead for you also, as you seek to fit yourselves for the first or second initiation. Even the love of humanity has to grow to a certain extent before the first initiation is possible. And then what about the second? And it has to continue to grow. So it's so simple a thought. The love of humanity. Do I love humanity? That means anyone. You have to be able to see beyond likes and dislikes, attraction and repulsion. You have to be able to see into the internal love which unites, and you have to be able to see into the sameness which monadically is, which is the sort of root of all brotherhood. Well, so let's work on that, because it's so simple. But he just says in a few sentences here, these are the things that we have to concentrate on. Let me put that in red, because it's so important. But they do not really love humanity as a whole. And, before the bar, the judgment seat of our own soul, we have to answer these questions, and we have to find a way to that state of consciousness which is so obviously present when we possess something of the mind which is in Christ, or the heart which is in Christ. I sometimes ask, create in me the mind that is in Christ. And, well, you can't really do it fully, but something comes, and the great Lord has this amazing capacity to love, and it does get transferred. And when it does, everything begins to change. So we certainly are on the path which is going to lead us to larger and more sensitive possibilities. Well, here's a little more. As usual, I started this program without looking at the chronometer, so it's hit or miss, and I don't think I'm going to find that 1 hour time exactly by any means, but all right. The second degree initiates are probationary initiates in the hierarchy. You look at this, and you see the hierarchy here. Come on now. Gotta find it, huh? Maybe I'm not going to find it because it's just like too. Should be here. There it is. Yeah. So if you really look here, and you see the 4 grades of initiates, 1, 2, 3, and 4. There they are below the hierarchy. And, well, initiates 1 and 2 are probationary. You become a disciple on Sirius at initiation 3, and initiation 5 you become a first degree initiate in relation to Sirius. So 2 corresponds with 4, and 1 corresponds with 3. The law of correspondence is very important, but we can't get simply caught in the mental work of seeking out the correspondences. So disciples who have taken the second initiation are regarded as probationary initiates, whereas those, let's just say, before the first initiation, are normal initiation, are regarded as probationary disciples. And there's a strong question as to whether the whole idea of probation extends until we become an accepted disciple, somewhere maybe between the first and second degree. And only when they have taken the third initiation are they truly initiate from the standpoint of the hierarchy. Maybe from the perspective of others they are, but how the hierarchy sees it, you only become an initiate when you take the third planetary and first solar initiation. The third degree is the first solar initiation we remember. We have to keep on reminding ourselves, don't we, of certain things that we know, but we may not have looked at them in enough contexts to solidify our understanding. The first initiation is sometimes spoken of as the Lemurian initiation, the third sub-race well, root race really, which is the foundation of self-conscious living somewhere in the middle of the third root race. Self-consciousness and individualization came into effect. And the second as the Atlantean initiation. But the third, that of our Aryan race, is technically regarded by them, capital T, as the first initiation. So, so many of us, maybe we have some degree of probationary status, first degree, second degree, but not the real initiate status as the hierarchy regards it. So this is a new angle upon which I would ask you to think. Aryan times through which we are living have to do with becoming the true initiate. It's not about the superiority of one race over another, as Germany interpreted and badly interpreted, misinterpreted. It's something quite different and subjective. The term, therefore, of accepted disciple covers the stages of the first and second initiations, and that stage is oftentimes not entered immediately at the first degree. No, it's entered oftentimes midway between the first and second degree, and sometimes even after the second degree. He says it's not just a question of achievement, it's a question of one's relationship to a particular master who may accept one. So someone who has a relatively higher status may not yet be an accepted disciple when compared with someone who may have a lower initiatory status but is related to a particular master in such a way that acceptance occurs. When a disciple has taken the third initiation, he is no longer technically an accepted disciple, even though he still remains in the master's group until he has taken the fourth initiation. And even then, we learn that Master DK works with 5 masters in his ashram. And so the stage of the master in the heart can indicate the fourth degree and still sees the initiate within the master's group. I'm pointing out these technicalities so that there may be clarity, fifth ray, clarity, and proportion. There's Libra, proportion, and there's Venus the ruler, and Venus conducting the fifth ray. So there may be clarity and proportion in your thinking. So various people, and in their millions, are going through the Lemurian initiation, and fewer, but many, are passing through the Atlantean initiation of the second degree, and so much of our work with psychology now in the countries that espouse that are promoting the possibility of the second initiation. And then finally, there are fewer, but there will be considerable number, and especially I would say in the next equinoctial age, who are going to be taking the third degree of the true Aryan initiation. Where Venus again will be very important. It will be the hierarchical ruler. It will be light, the beginning of supernal light upon the mountaintop of initiation. So I think we can expect in the next age of Capricorn many, relatively to what we have now, taking the third degree, but this will also be possible in the number of incarnations before some of us, let's say, during the Aquarian age. And DK tells us, interestingly enough, that many initiates of the fifth degree will be required in order to help humanity and the planet make the transition which lies before it really an important initiation for the planetary logos, a kind of fourth minor initiation which involves a lot of suffering, I think, and eventually, but not immediately, the second cosmic initiation for our planetary logos really has only taken one cosmic initiation, though already 3 of the subsidiary initiations. All this information is tied together, and we have to use Mercury to keep the relationship clear between the many items of information so that they create or demonstrate as one whole, which comes as close as possible to representing the archetypal truth that we begin to find on the Buddhic plane and then more completely on the monadic plane. Well, okay, so let's just say I'm not going to get into the next one just yet because I'm trying to keep these programs in the vicinity of an hour. The wonderful helpers that are transcribing these into print, I don't envy the job, tell me that it gets very discouraging when you have a 3-hour program or 4-hour program. So I try to keep them in the vicinity of an hour. So let's call this the end of second initiation compilation. Is that good enough? And I can't really say what page it relates to because we're skipping many pages, skipping around here. And I can only say that it is the 14th of June, 2018, and the beginning. Okay, second initiation compilation program number 1, and here we have the beginning of second initiation compilation program number 2. And who knows when I'll take this up, hopefully soon. And thank you for abiding with me here. It's been a while since I've been able to do this. The conference has intervened, and I love to be able to look into these things with you and hopefully offer some thoughts which you can correlate and which are of value to you. But it's been a while. And it takes, one gets a little bit rusty, you know, so trying to get things flowing more smoothly. Thank you, and we'll see you soon.